Welcome back. For your do now, I wanted you thinking about a few years into the future when you move out on your own, you move out of your parents', your guardian's house. Um, where do you see yourself living? So tell me about the location. Is it in Denver? Where in Denver? Is it another city, different country? Um, but don't just tell me location. Tell me about the apartment itself or the house. What's it look like? What sort of things does it have? Is it in the middle of the city? Is it out in the open by itself? Like, give me some of those details of where you want to live in a few years from now. Maybe you got like long term goals of owning a mansion on the beach. What's your realistic goal in the next 5, 10 years? Today, we're going to be talking about renting an apartment, housing, where you live. It'd be great if you could own a house at 18, 19 years old. And maybe some of you are lucky enough to have that. But the reality is, you're probably going to have to rent a place for honestly a lot of your 20s before you're going to be able to be in position to probably afford a home of some kind. Um, so houses are really expensive, especially here in Denver. You're talking $500,000 for a lot of these houses, and a lot of banks are requiring 10% of that when you buy the house. So you would need $50,000 to get the loan to buy the house. And then you're paying a couple $1,000s every month for the next 30 years to own the home. Many banks would not lend that amount of money to an 18, 19-year-old just out of high school. You need to have a job. You need to have good savings. You have to have a good credit score. You need all this stuff in order to get the house. So for most people in their late teens, early mid 20s, buying a house is not an option. You have to rent an apartment, rent a home, something you're going to be borrowing the home, the house, the apartment, and paying rent. Now you can rent a house. That's fine. Um, Typically, when you rent a house, it's one, it's going to be way more expensive. Two, there's lots of expectations on you to keep the house looking good. You know, it's like mowing the lawn, the trash, the bills. Like there's a lot into a house, which is why most people in their 20s are actually renting apartments, not homes. So if you're searching for an apartment, there's lots of things online, lots of options. You can find all these different apartment complexes. They all have websites where you can research online. Um, and they have good tools for you to narrow down your search based on location, based on your price range, also based on what you're looking for. Maybe you're looking for a 2 bedroom, a 3 bedroom, how many baths, things like that. Um, and when you go online, they can give you a quote and tell you about how much um, rent would be to live in a house like that or live in an apartment like that. They'll also have options to do a tour. Right? They're virtual tours online, so you can go around and see what it looks like. I'd also recommend go to the actual place. Say you want to do a tour so you can walk around and see what this actually looks like with your own eyes. Um, but if you get to the point where you're actually going to the apartment and getting a tour, you should be prepared to sign the lease that day. You should be prepared to sign and do and rent that apartment the day of. That's like the last thing you do. Um, the reason why I say that is because oftentimes apartments will, when you come in for the tour, they'll say, here's the price. When you come back, they'll say, oh man, our prices just went up. Right. So you got to be prepared to do it that day if you want to get that price. Now, to sign a lease is just the contract to rent. This is you're signing a contract agreeing to rent it. Typically, it's for 1 year. Um, and then after that 1 year, sometimes they do what we call month to month. So you agree every month to extend the contract, you and the owner. Um, Inside this contract is all the expectations to pay, but also what you're expected to do, what rules, what you're not allowed to do, how they charge fees, all that stuff. These rules are pretty simple. They'll say stuff like no pets or no smoking or something. So you'd have to get an apartment that has those options if you want a pet or something. They'll have information about like um, when things are due, what sort of bills you need to pay, and then fines for being late. There's also security deposits. This throws a lot of kids off. When you go to rent an apartment, they're going to want 2 months up front, 2 months rent up front. So the first one is to pay the first month's rent, and then you pay an additional month's worth as what we call a security deposit. Now, the owner of the apartment is going to keep that money, and when you move out in a year or however long, if the apartment and everything's still in good condition, you can get that deposit back. Now, if you bust out some walls, you break the sink or a toilet or something, they're going to take that money and use it to fix the apartment back up. So, whatever damage you cause, you're losing money. And if you skip out and just leave without paying your contract, they're going to keep that money. So, it's a deposit to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in the apartment, and kind of protect their risk. Now, most people get it back after they move out. But it is a lot up front if you're looking to move out on your own and you're planning and you're thinking, well, I can afford 1 month's rent. Well, a lot of times you need 2 months' rent. A good question to ask is when you go to an apartment is what bills are included in the rent and what aren't. Um, so there's the rent for just the right to live there, but then there's also water bills. I've had apartments that pay my water, apartments where I have to pay them on my own. Some apartments just average everyone in the apartment complex how much water was used, and you do your share. Right. So I was at an apartment with like pool. Well, I had to pay for all that water. Is your electricity, and most of these are going to be not included in rent. You're going to have to set up your own Excel energy account and pay for your electricity and gas. Garbage, sewer, you got to pay for someone to take your trash and have a sewer to get water out. A lot of times that is included in apartments. Renter's insurance to insure all the stuff you have in the apartment in case your neighbor decides to burn it down. All right, so you might be required to have insurance. If you have a pet, sometimes there's pet rent. You have to pay extra fee for the pet. And there's lots of other fees they might tack on processing your monthly payment. There might be additional fees for like a gym or for the pool or for like the office, right? Internet. Those are all different things. You should also look into amenities, the bonuses that apartments have. So, like pool and hot tub. That might be a big thing to you. You want an apartment that has access to a pool. I've had apartments with pools, some without. Um, the ones that did, I used, but not as much as I don't know. I guess I thought going in. Gyms. It's always nice to have one with small, workout equipment. An office where you have access to like a computer and the ability to print, which maybe you need. Parking might be a big one. Right? There's some apartments where you have a certain parking spot. Some you have to pay for a parking spot. Some you have to park on the street. It's definitely something you want to figure out before you rent an apartment. Today, you're going to be researching different apartment options in Denver. I want you to be realistic. Right? Think about how much money you're probably going to be making in the next few years. Maybe you can't afford that downtown apartment that overlooks the mountains and has all this great amenities. Be realistic. Where do you think you're going to be living in 2 or 3 years? It doesn't have to be the worst apartment of all time, but look at something that might actually help you. I will say do not share personal information with them. If they ask for your phone number, social security number, or anything like that, don't give it to them. And these are salesmen. So when you give them their information, they are going to try and contact you and they'll bug you. Just don't give them anything personal. Just look at what they have and what they offer.